Stephen Ferrara co-founded the Hudson Advisory Team, a boutique luxury real estate firm, in 2017. He leads one of the highest grossing agent teams in the country and has successfully completed some of the most notable transactions in New York City. Prior to real estate, Stephen worked in hospitality, where he managed client experience in a first-class atmosphere. Stephen specializes and uses the motto of going, an inch wide, mile deep in downtown Manhattan, where he focuses on West Village, Greenwich Village, Tribeca, and NoHo. His extensive knowledge in architecture and design of homes really set him apart, and that's what's helped them grow to be the #1 team, mega team per Wall Street Journal, and one of the top teams, if not the top team, in Compass nationally. Stephen's resided in the West Village for the last 15 years, where he's bought, renovated, and sold multiple properties on his own. And I'm super excited to hear from Stephen, his knowledge and how he's built this powerhouse of a team and now his own office space, which I'm curious to get into. Welcome to Compass Conversation, Stephen Ferrara.
Thank you for the very flattering and humbling as well introduction. Very long, by the way. We could have done 2 sentences there. And it's nice to see a lot of familiar faces here. Obviously, always good to talk to you and see you guys.
So welcome to Compass Conversation, Stephen, co-founder, Hudson Advisory, over 4 billion sold. You guys are ranked #1. Congrats on the success. But before we get into that, let's start from the beginning. Before real estate, you worked in hospitality. What's some of your biggest takeaways, I guess, coming from that and then before diving into real estate?
Yeah, it's interesting. It's, in a lot of ways, I would argue they have nothing to do with each other. But if I really, zoom out and distill it and keep it very simple, they have everything to do with each other. I think outside of the contact list that I made, that I was very fortunate, I was sort of part of the IT crowd during the meatpacking transformation of restaurants and nightclubs. And I was a lot younger and cooler than I am today. And I was sort of a general manager for a restaurant group that also happened to be running and owning and operating the sort of hottest nightclubs and lounges in town. And I was in my early 20s. I think I got really good exposure to a lot of interesting and influential people that over time have definitely shaped my career. But I think the biggest takeaway was service and dependability and accountability and how you make people feel from the moment the first interaction takes place to the end of the transaction is really no different than in real estate. And the transaction doesn't end when somebody leaves the restaurant. It doesn't end when someone leaves the nightclub, just like our job doesn't necessarily end when you hand over the keys or get paid and the transaction's fulfilled. You're still in each other's lives. Hopefully you choose to be. Hopefully the client wants you to be. But there's also many instances where your job is purely transactional. They don't want a new friend. They don't want a new advisor. You did your job. They want you to go in your separate ways. But again, from first interaction to last in just that sequence, it's the same exact experience. And I can land it and summarize it very quickly to the person who's coming into dinner for their anniversary, or the trader or broker who are bringing their biggest clients to a nightclub. The second they get out of the car and go to the door, the second they're greeted, how they're walked in, where they're sat, how their interactions go, to the minute they pay their bill and leave and get in their car, that entire experience is really meant to be curated. And people pay attention to details in that industry just as much as they do in our industry in real estate. So it was a seamless transition with respect to service and really client first. And again, how you make people feel, they remember. So I think there's a direct tie in there from a hospitality to real estate standpoint.
I think on the website, as I was kind of just scanning through some of your inventory and some of the write-ups, it says, the Hudson Advisory difference. And that's really it. And we'll kind of dive into kind of how you treat clients and that white glove type service. Any of the clients from this career in hospitality, now clients today on the real estate side?
Yeah, it's interesting. On paper, when I left hospitality and I was just exhausted and getting burnt out, and I realized the more and more you work, the biggest difference is you don't control your financial outcome. Often, it's driven by a number of other things, where in real estate, you have full control. You can work 7 days a week. You can work as much as you want, and your income potential is not capped. That's not the case when you're a salaried employee or a manager, or even directly to a profit share of a nightclub or a restaurant. Those have hours, and the hours at some point are closed, right? So if you think about that, it's very different. If you think about how it translates from a client perspective, I left that business thinking, I know everyone. Everyone likes me. I made all these friends. Of course, they're going to want to buy and sell real estate with me. They're going to rent with me. I didn't make $1 my first 11 months in the business. So I will tell you that transition is not as seamless as one would think. But again, zooming out, I think 90% of my business, I've been in the business for 12 years now, 90% of it, I can one way or another triangulate that it came from some touch point and some relationship and some introduction that happened 15 years ago when I was in hospitality.
That's awesome. So the segue, what was that leap that you had to take to get from hospitality into real estate? Like, was there a certain moment that were like, all right, here's the change? Like, how did it happen?
The people who were having a lot of fun in that era were in finance and real estate, and the people who were spending money and in my mind, therefore making money, the people who were in finance, I didn't speak the same language. Stylistically, it wasn't such a match. It felt very volatile. There would be moments where they were super high and happy and moments where they were very low and aggro. And that's not to generalize it, but that was my experience. In real estate, it was relatively even keeled. Everybody was generally happy. It was something I understood. I had an eye for design. When we were laying out rooms, it's no different than laying out an apartment or a house in real estate, right? When you're building a new venue. So I understood the design. I understood the architecture, not, on an educated background way, but I understood where things had to go and how circulation and view corridors and how these things interacted. I'm not a spreadsheet guy. So I looked at those and I thought, it's going to be one way or the other. One was very obvious to me, and the other was very obvious that I probably wouldn't be good at it and definitely wouldn't have been successful. Mm-hmm. So real estate, in a way, became a default, but it was not a fall back. This is going to be an easy thing. It was more like, this is inspiring and these people are interesting. And I walk my dog through the city streets and the buildings are beautiful. And I would stop and take pictures of buildings, and I would Google who lived in the building before I was in real estate. So when I got into it, I took the same approach, and it did feel very natural, albeit very intimidating.
Yeah, and I think your dog's a celebrity at this point, by the way.
He's in my headshot. He's laying next to me. Our office is being built, so I'm in my home office now, which we call the command center. And he takes his best naps in here while I try not to yell too loud.
That's awesome. And so 8 years ago, similar to me, just a little over 8 years ago, you made the move to Compass. Tell us about your experience and what were those conversations like?
Excuse me. I still remember Rory at the time was I don't know the language you guys use today. Is it not growth officer? He was like
strategic growth manager.
Strategic growth manager. There you go. And Rory was cold calling me. And I was like, who is this guy who's so persistent, but also like kind of likable, even though I had never met him. It wasn't like a solicitation dial and smile and dial service. There was definitely something there. I was working for a company called Town. Clayton, my business partner, was actually at Douglas Elliman. We were not together prior to Compass. And I just remember, I'm like, this guy's not going to leave me alone. Let me actually go see what's there. Leonard had but Leonard went to Compass, and in New York City, that was a very big stamp of, okay, this is a business. When it was Urban Compass, respectfully, Robert, no one really took it seriously. When it became Compass and Leonard came over, and I think at the time his title might have been president or something to the effect, and it was like, wait, there's something there. This guy just left a major role at Element, left several $1 billion of new development pipeline on the table to go here. Let me take this a little bit more seriously. And I got in a room with Rory. Ultimately, Robert was still involved in the recruiting process at the time. And I said, guys, I'm going to bring in someone who I'm going to partner with. We're going to be the biggest team at Compass. I can't say his name, I can't tell you who it is. You have to take this sort of blind leap of faith. And I showed up a week later with Clayton, and we struck a deal on the spot. We shook hands. We did not get a particularly good deal. So I think the stories of Compass writing these big checks, I unfortunately wasn't a beneficiary of that. So I cannot confirm that that ever happened. But we came to Compass and we came with something to prove. We were two individual agents. We had good respective careers and businesses, but no one really knew who I was. No one really knew who he was, which was at the time very intentional. I liked kind of being low key, somewhat enigmatic, relatively anonymous. My clients knew me, the brokers around me knew me, but we were discreetly been doing our own like relatively large businesses at the time. The month I signed with Compass, I think I did like 60 or 70 million just that month, which was the biggest month of my career in fairness at the moment. But we came and it was like, it's funny, we got tucked in the middle of like the pit, we called it. And I thought it was going to be this velvet rope and all these things I talked about, corner office and next to Leonard. And we were on like the floor, 3 floors below, a little office, one tiny window. And I was like, all right, we need to fucking work. We have a lot to prove, part of my language. We both have chips on our shoulders. Like, let's go. Let's build something real and let's build something serious. And frankly, let's outwork everyone. Not Compass, just in general. It was like, I think there was a lot of like, who are these guys? And it was like, okay, time to go.
Yeah, it's incredibly inspiring. And I think, a lot of people, listening are kind of in that situation, whether they just joined or whether they find themselves, let's call it in the bullpen, as we say, versus the private offices. It's just motivation at large. And if you have the private office, you want the bigger one, you want the corner one. And it's all, kind of things are tied to production. At this time, when you join, you make that handshake with Clayton. Is it just you two, or do you start to structure the team at that time?
It's a great question. So it was the two of us. The first 4 people really became 5 when we started. I came over first. I came over September 15th, 2016 was my start date at Compass. I came over with Ian Lefkowitz, who's on our team, and some of you may know him, and he's great. And you should have him on the podcast because his business is 15x from where he was when he started. So he's a real testament to like follow systems, double down on what you're good at, leverage the people around you for all the right reasons, and like his business has exploded. I think he's like a really remarkable success story. And still growing, by the way. I came over with Ian. Clayton came over in January with Clea Cornell, who he has been working with for over 13 years. And we had made one hire on a sort of employee or staff level, which was a woman named Rachel, who's no longer in the business. She actually moved out of the city, left the industry, but she was our first director of operations. And she was with us for 3 years and like bootstrapping and starting a business, 3 years of being like the only ops person with 2, relatively intense founders, and real growth. We had a real, our business went from, I think our first year was like just under 200 million a year to by the time she left about 500 million a year. She was really integral in the beginning and early stages. And it's no different than Compass if you think about it. Different phases of the business require different skill sets, require different personnel, different body count, right? How many people do you need in a specific role? Now we have 20 Manhattan agents, 4 Brooklyn agents, 4 Hamptons agents, and 5 sort of back office, which ranges from a head of brand to director of operations to personal assistants, or executive assistants, better said. But yeah, started very small, and the plan was not to go so big. It kind of happened on its own.
Yeah, and it's very clear, and we'll go into the structure a little bit later. But yeah, you built a well-oiled system. To talk specifically about your market, so New York City, probably the #1 feeder market for the majority of markets in the world, I would say at this point. Florida's making a little bit of a run for it the past few years. But tell us about the New York City trends. Like, where do you see the challenges and opportunities? You specialize in key areas, which I guess you should definitely touch on for those that are not so familiar with the city or have visited maybe not those specific areas. But, tell us a little bit about kind of like where your head's at and what you got in inventory.
Yeah, also a good question. And I would argue, before we get into specific like submarkets and performance of New York, I would actually argue I get more sort of flow inbound from South Florida than any other market in the country by a considerable margin. So I would say that New York it is very much reciprocal, and we tend to be a beneficiary as much as, particularly earlier when the COVID wave, it felt like everyone was leaving New York, and there were moments we could guide who they were going to work with and where they were going. Some people had relationships, some people already had other homes, but we're kind of in this weird or interesting moment that it's the pendulum swinging back. And maybe they're not leaving South Florida. They're not leaving Austin. Maybe they're not leaving Los Angeles, but they are coming back for a footprint in New York. And whether that be personally or professionally driven, it's an interesting trend to see. With respect to the New York City performance, my focus is downtown. We really focus on the luxury markets, downtown West Side particularly. So West Village, Tribeca, Soho, NoHo, Nolita, Greenwich Village. For anyone who doesn't know those, it's really downtown West Side, not so far south where it's financial district, not so far north where it's midtown. We can cover river to river. But what's interesting about my business personally, that's where I practice. As a founder and running the team, I get to see the whole playing field. And what I mean by the playing field is I see the city, all of it, uptown, downtown, east side, west side. I see the Hamptons market, which is almost its own sub-market in a weird way to the New York City market. And I see the Brooklyn market. We have a Brooklyn team who's incredible, and they cover all of the prime sub-markets in Brooklyn. So you see a lot of trends. This year's been very interesting to look at the data year over year. 21, 22, for example, the West Village townhouse market was in a specific price point, so let's say 5 to 30 million, which is, an attractive and not, the numbers are obviously staggering, but it is not stratospheric for a West Village townhouse. They're trading in the 20s pretty routinely. In 21 and 22, we saw 45 and 44 sales each year. This year to date, we've seen 17. So most would argue, okay, the townhouse market's down. Hudson Advisory, my team, we've been responsible for about 60% of those sales this year, which is exciting to be in the middle of all of it. But pricing is not down. Absorption is down. And I never thought this market would be so correlated to rates. But I think you could argue the knock-on effect of higher rates, higher construction costs, more time to carry, the calculus of buying a townhouse, renovating it. It's a 4-year renovation now. Construction cost is up 50%. Rates are 3x what they were in 21. I think the data is telling you that the market is actually highly susceptible to the rate environment and escalated carrying costs. Outside of the West Village market, anything turnkey in the West Village sells like this. If it's reasonably, we listed something for 3.8 4 days ago. We've got 5 offers on it. We listed a rental. We represent a landlord who has a rental asset on Charles and Hudson. For, if anyone knows, it's a very prime rental corridor in sort of the heart of the West Village. We listed it for $25,000. It's a 3-bedroom. We had 50 people trying to get in 48 hours. We had 7 sight unseen offers. These are people that didn't walk into the building. They've never seen the apartment. They have to have it. And what does that tell you? It's that the inventory is so thin. The demand is so high, the supply is so low. And to build in New York City, a real proper building can be a 7-year cycle. We do new development. I've been working on a building pre-development for 4 years. They haven't touched a brick yet. Might be an 8 or 9 year cycle at this point. So because of the landmark status, because of the difficult in building and the bureaucratic nature of just cities, inventory has been the biggest challenging. So I reference West Village a lot because here it's very obvious. Then you have markets like the Upper East Side. The inventory there has been so challenging that you're seeing the condominiums being built on 2nd and 3rd Avenue. Historically, if you were east of Park, or east of Lex, which is further from Central Park, those were really C locations. Some of the best performing buildings are actually, that Compass happens to be representing a lot of them. Alexa Lambert works, the Naftali Group, who's the developer, and Robert Amstern's doing a lot of the architecture. So it's very notable, but they're on 83rd and 2nd. A decade ago, you couldn't give an apartment away there. And now that's a new prime corridor because of these new buildings and new development. So you're seeing each market perform very differently. Really, in my opinion, it's all driven by supply. It's a lot of people, probably akin to all of the markets for everyone on the call. Anyone who's locked in with a good home that doesn't need to move, that has a good rate, or owns it with no debt, it is very difficult to get them to move. It takes Liz Hogan, knocking on their door with some astronomical price where they kind of have to take it. And that's how you're unlocking the inventory. Or you have to find them something that's so special that they're willing to make the trade. So the biggest thing for us, and by the way, we're having a record year. This is by far our best year, which is really exciting, but it is definitely far from an easy year. 2021, 22, I remember we sold the penthouse at 56 Leonard. I sold it I was on a boat on the phone negotiating a deal. And I literally sold the most expensive penthouse downtown over the phone, not in New York. That doesn't happen anymore. Those days are over, at least for now. We're in the trenches. We're working 7 days a week. I don't know when that will change. I don't know what will change. It feels somewhat of an insecure market. I don't know if people in Florida are feeling the same thing, but that's how the market's performing. And I think the people who are in front of it and have the data, have the confidence and conviction, and can really educate their clients, they're the ones who are outperforming other agents in this market.
Yeah, and it's so clear you're leaning into the beginning of this year was this uncertainty, noise in the headlines. We experienced these changes. You guys are working harder. Let's say if the climate in this industry is not more difficult, it's maybe just different. I've heard Mark McLaughlin say that a few times. I kind of like that approach. You touched a really good point, which is these sellers, and obviously you guys are doing superior work right now. The sellers, what are those conversations like? Obviously, they're asking a lot more questions. They're referencing headlines. They might not have the big picture, but you guys are doing a great job of pricing things correctly, and they're moving. I think we see a lot of astronomical prices here in South Florida. They sit for a bit until they're priced right. We see some movement. Obviously, in the ultra luxury, it's a little bit different story with less comps and whatnot. But curious to hear your take on kind of the industry changes and how you're navigating that with sellers and buyers.
Somebody said, I was at an event last night, and someone said it to me, and I'm going to paraphrase this, and I'm sure I'm butchering it, but I thought it was genius. And I said, how are you handling this buyer agreement? I'm supposed to have someone sign something before I show them something, and they're my backstop if the seller doesn't pay a fee. For me, it feels very confusing and almost like a weird way to do business personally. And he said, you know what? I haven't done any of it. I said, interesting. What's your thesis? He said, there's enough people that have a lot more at stake than me that are really worried about it. I'd rather just let them worry about it and just continue to do my job. If I get burned on a deal or burned on a fee, shame on me. But I'm treating this as business as usual. I'm not going to let this be a distraction. The second I start thinking about this in the paperwork process, I probably do something wrong. And I'm no longer thinking about being the best advisor to my client. And I'm no longer being the best at what I do, because what I do is not having a buyer sign an agreement. So I know that's going to be, contradicting to what you're telling your agents. And by the way, you're giving them the right advice. It's what Gordon and Rory and Robert are telling us. They're giving us the right advice. But I feel like if I'm getting in the weeds on that stuff, I'm losing the bigger picture. So at the same time, when we're going on listing pitches, and every single one I've been on in the last week, the NAR suit has come up. And I've said simply, commissions have always been negotiable, and buyers have never had representation in New York City. Nothing has changed. The agreement I'm going to put in front of you outlines the fee structure you're paying me as your advisor, the fee structure that you're paying the buyer's broker, in the event that you want to incentivize them. And I would highly encourage you to incentivize them, because the second you don't, two things happen. One, it just gets reduced from your purchase price, and they're going to, if it's 2.5 or 3%, you're going to get that much less in your offer. They're going to pay their own agent. Makes no difference to you. Two, you're going to lose the people who, like myself, don't want to have those conversations with their clients. Now, I don't even know bluntly where you search for the fee structure when you go to search a property. I'm assuming that I'm being paid if I'm doing my job. So the first thing we did in New York City, now you're supposed to have commission agreements by the seller in a transaction, even if you're representing the buyer. How am I going to get a seller I have no relationship with to sign something before I send an offer? It's not going to happen. So I send my offer. I send it with an outline of my fee expectation. When a deal sheet goes out, which is non-binding, by the way, in New York City, that outlines the fee structure. And I send, at that moment, the attorneys are involved. I send the buyer representative attorney. So if it's my client's attorney, I send him the commission structure and said, make sure before wire is released and the buyer's signature pages are released, this is signed. And I pass it to them. And if you're working with the same attorneys routinely, or you feel like you have a good enough control of the flow, that's sort of my position. Maybe it's not the right way, but it's the way I'm doing it. And you know, for this is brand new in New York. I think it may have went into effect earlier for you guys. For the last 10 days, I think I've done 3 deals on the buy side, and I did each one the same way. And knock on wood, none of them have closed yet. So I'm assuming I'm getting paid at the closing, but they've all been signed.
Nice. No, and it's a good take. And obviously I think everybody's navigating it differently and implementing the paperwork. We've had so many, you know, like I think courses essentially on obviously what the required documents are and everything. But it's I think it's insightful of how you're having those conversations because it's clear. I mean, homes that are offering 0, they're not getting the quality agents and the quality buyers, but then they offer, you know, the expectation and kind of, like you said, business as usual. All of a sudden there's 5 offers and there's traction, and, you know, so don't hurt yourself, but, you know, you have to have those difficult conversations, show the data, as you mentioned. And I think that will speak volumes into getting the client to realize, do they want to sell or do they want to play hardball here? And it'll make a significant difference.
I think it's comical at best to think that a 2.5 or 3% savings is going to make housing more affordable. And I think it's laughable and really borderline insanity to think that you're going to have a more optimal outcome by saving the 2 to 3%. I think I don't know, whatever the narrative is, whatever the media spin is, I understand that's what it is, and our industry feels under attack. But I think just like, again, zoom out. If we're being pragmatic, it makes no sense. And I think anyone who's really thinking a bigger picture, and anyone who is level-headed enough to listen to whoever is advising them, I don't find that to be a difficult sell.
Yeah. Yeah, and a few years ago, you were in the Miami Beach office. We had you on a panel, and the topic of like consistent client communication came up. So similar to kind of what we're talking about and going into this. I have yet to see someone do what you guys have implemented as a team with the WhatsApp, with the ongoing Google Docs, and kind of all of that stuff. The closest I think might have been Josh Totoli was mentioning on one of these calls, similar kind of how he's doing weekly follow-ups powered by data and Compass tools, market watches and hot sheets and whatever you want to call them. But tell us a little bit about kind of like you get that seller or buyer, whether they're in a collection or whatnot, you know, tell us how you stay in touch with them, because I think this is incredible and incredibly impactful and shows the value that you and the team provide.
I appreciate that. And I think I remember that meeting, and it was you, Dominique, Jeff, and I think we even like sent out afterwards our org chart and some of our processes, which I'm happy to share. You know, one thing we do, again, it ties in really to your first question when we started half an hour ago, which is hospitality industry. What is the correlation? What's the similarity? For me, client service is critical. I don't ever want to be on my heels. I always want to feel like the client knows what's going on. I've sold my own real estate in other markets. I do not like having to call someone and text them an email and ask for an update. I think it's a really bad experience as a consumer to not know where things stand. So what we've done, and none of this is rocket science in fairness, but what we've done is we use Google Docs for 24/7 live communication. Anytime I show a property, I enter the name, I enter the feedback, and I enter the follow-up, or when the follow-up's taking place. What is the action step? What's the takeaway from that experience? The seller can log in at 2 in the morning, 5 in the morning, midnight, 7 days a week. They know exactly who's toured their home, how many people have toured it, how many offers have they had, how many second showings have they had. And the feedback is consolidated, right? So it allows you to analyze trends. If I go show your property and I call you after and say, hey, it was great, this person, they love the wallpaper, and they'll call me when if they want to see it or make an offer, whatever, I disappear. 2 days later, I show it again. I call them, oh, this person loves the wallpaper. If it's not centralized anywhere, there's no way to pick up on that. So think about the negative feedback. Loved the house, thought it was dark. Loved the house, was concerned about light. Whatever the narrative is, if you're able to centralize this and in 3 weeks look at this and say, we've shown it 10 times, 8 of the people were worried about the light, 4 of the people commented that the pricing was high, you have market feedback. It may not be the end all be all, but you're able to track the trend and you're able to see what the consistent feedback is. We also do bi-weekly reports. The reports are extremely granular. They're everything that's happening around you from a comp perspective, everything we're doing from a marketing perspective in this 2-week period, everything that's coming up in the next 2-week period, all the feedback that's sort of aggregate, but we consolidate it for that 2-week period. Everything's in front of you. It can be anywhere from 4 to 15 pages. It's highly visual, which for me, I'm a visual person. I think it's nice to see the marketing that's coming with it, not just words on paper, not just numbers, but more graphic driven. And in my experience, and I think the feedback we're getting from our clients are that it's a very easy way for them to be in the know consistently. Why do we do bi-weekly feedback reports? Because if you're doing it every week, there may not be enough action every week. If you're doing it every month, you may be missing something from 28 days ago that was highly relevant then that's no longer relevant now. So we found like the 2-week period, really first and the 15th and the 30th, kind of like that zone to be the perfect cadence where it shows you're working. It shows them what's happening with their asset. It shows them what's happening around them. And it allows you to really absorb, but also to analyze any trends. I'd say the last piece is internal. Everything we do is centralized on WhatsApp. Everything we do is on Dropbox. We use WhatsApp like it's a Slack channel. I've never used Slack, admittedly, but our WhatsApp group, if it's buyer, Jared Klein, anyone who's working on that is on that group. If you see an apartment you like, goes onto that group. We're making an offer, it's on that group. Jared search parameters on that group. Every listing we have, we use the Compass office, 110 Fifth. We have a cheat sheet. What's the square footage? What's the bed and bath count? Who is the architect? When was it last designed? What are the seller notes? And everything short and sweet, so you can on the fly. I could get there 2 minutes before it's showing, and if I need a quick refresh, it's right in front of me. That was the only way I saw that we could scale the business. And I'm very fortunate that my business partner, very systems driven, our back office, very systems driven. We have a very well-oiled machine. We do 400 plus transactions a year, over $1 billion a year, 5 years in a row now. It is impossible to do that if you're not organized. Impossible. You'll lose your mind. B, you'll burn out. C, you'll get fired because you won't have a good handle on your clients. And lastly, the team won't be happy. There's no direction for the team. It's just purely reactive. There's nothing that's exciting and creative about it. You're just kind of process managing. I think systems are the biggest thing, and the Compass tools are perfect for that. Collections, CRM, we use all of that. That goes to, and the data pulls are huge. It goes directly into everything we do.
Yeah, and I think one part I wrote down, which I found inspiring on the website, was the Hudson Advisory difference, which mentioned a little bit earlier, but united by an appreciation for design and architecture. And I think there's one thing that really shines through is what I've been hearing from what you said, from walking with your dog, looking at buildings, Googling who lives there, who made it, where did this come from, and I think that's when you're sitting with a seller, they have to be like wow, this guy, he knows everything. And I think it's an important aspect of what makes your competitive edge so great. So tell us a little bit about kind of the appreciation for architecture and design.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll tell you, I'd say two things. Well, it's very flattering. I have to recognize that I cover a very specific zone. It's impossible to do that citywide. It's like if you're in South of Fifth, you can know every building south of Fifth. You can know everyone who lives in every building south. You can know which lines face which direction. You can know what the view breaks are over the yacht club, whatever they are, which gets the best sunsets, etc. It is impossible to do that in all of Miami Beach, for example. Mm-hmm. For me in the West Village, I started doing this before I was in real estate. So I started doing it as just a local, as a neighbor, right? I think the appreciation for design and architecture, it's a big, beautiful city. It also is gritty. To see a new glass building next to an old pre-war warehouse, there's something like that juxtaposition for me was very fascinating. So it's something that I just had a passion for organically. When I was growing up, I grew up in Montclair, New Jersey. I drive down the street, you walk down the street, there's old colonial houses next to stone houses, next to, some of them are huge sprawling estates. And then you have a tenement building. All of this was very interesting for me. So I guess in a way I grew up with the eye to appreciate that. With respect to that, how it relates professionally and how it translates rather professionally. I had someone the other day, I walked them down the street and I said, they wanted to spend $20 million to own a 4-bedroom in the West Village. They can't find anything. They were new clients. I walked them past, started at the Southwest Village, walked to the Northwest Village. I walked them up and down every street, an hour, and I love the walking tour. I love it. Because if you're good at it, it shows that you really know every single thing in your market. Like, this building's a piece of shit. That's a bad developer. This is a lawsuit. That's what you should be looking at. Nothing's going to turn up in here. You love this building. They don't have any 4 bedrooms. They're only 2s and 3s. You have to do a combination, renovation, blah, blah, blah. The guy said to me at the end, he goes, I think you might have Asperger's. And I actually took that as a deep compliment. Because he was like, you know everything about every single thing. Like, how do you know all this? How do you memory bank all this? And I was like, buddy, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. But I know everything about this market. And that's inch wide, mile deep.
Yeah, no, it's remarkable. That's hilarious. And it's true. Obviously here it's maybe a little bit more air conditioned car tours, but it's the same effort. It's the same effort and really trying to, drive by homes and know neighborhoods, know homes, and know the history and who builds them and so on and so forth. So, with just a few minutes left, I'd love to run through these final questions because I think they're so impactful, and the value that you drive on these topics are going to be insightful for all the agents tuning in and that listen to the recording. So your team branding is something that shined bright for me as, someone, a creative and someone that started in marketing at Compass. From the social media to cover page ads in the New York Times and the swag, I think Jeff sleeps with that hat on, by the way.
He sweat through the last one. I'll send a new bag.
Thank God. Yeah, you needed a new one for sure. Could you provide maybe a big marketing win or something that you're passionate about from your branding that you feel like has done a really good job of showcasing your guys' DNA?
I appreciate it. It's very, very kind of you and very flattering. And I'm fortunate that we have Marissa Nelson, who's sort of head of brand, as we call her. She comes from a beauty and marketing background. So for her, it's very visual, very aesthetic driven. As someone who is also has an eye for design and appreciates those things, she knows a lot more about it than I do. And Clayton and I are extremely opinionated, I'd say. Very passionate, but very opinionated. So it can be difficult to kind of, I'm not oblivious that we are extremely difficult to work for and with. That said, one thing we've always been aligned on has been the visual representation. We spend an ungodly amount of money on swag. And you'll go, I had somebody this summer send me a picture. They were in Ibiza, and there was like a group of guys, a group of girls, and one of the girls and one of the guys who did not know each other were both wearing Hudson Advisory hats. And they ended up going and talking to each other, sent us pictures. This is across the world. I'm not even convinced I knew who the girl was, but she's wearing a Hudson Advisory hat. Now, why is that relevant? Why is that cool? What does that mean? It means that somebody in whatever market they're in is talking about us. We are now relevant to them. They're going to tell that story. They went on a date or met some hot guy on the beach who was wearing the Hudson Advisory hat and knew Clayton and Stephen or Ian or Clay or someone on the team. So the swag has been huge. It's something we're very passionate and excited about, and we constantly change it, and we're constantly playing with colors and trying new vendors. And but with respect to the visual representation, we brought all marketing in-house. We work with Compass. I think they probably can't stand me, but we work with Compass. We have a rolling call with Compass marketing, and everything we do has multiple layers of yes, no, yes, no, yes, no, too big, too small. I don't like the font. The saturation is too high. Like, it's none of this is just hope it looks good and hope people like it. There are people, I'd like to think we have eyes on this, but Compass marketing, there are people who went to college for marketing. You're nuts to not leverage that. You're nuts. These are people who studied AI and study social media and analytics. Why would we not leverage that? So for us, a big thing is the way we photograph listings. We want to be more details and interior and sort of architecturally editorial style driven. In a sea of wide angles and bright oversaturated pictures, it's very easy to blend in if you do that. I'm a contrarian. I like to zig when people zag. If everyone's doing that, let's do something different. That's boring. The consumer's bored by that. We're fortunate that our clients happen to have spaces that photograph this way. We've been working with Jason Saft, who's a Compass agent, but he launched a design and staging business, Stage to Sell, and he's exceptional at it. Jason, I don't know if you're on this call, I adore you. You're a far better stager than you are a broker. And I'll show you the way he designs things, specifically when he stages things for us. He knows, like, I need a memento in this corner. I need this to be a detail shot. I need a vase here and this color flower on an accent wall with a little bit of a sliver view out the window. And we're going to shoot this vertically, not wide angle, because that's what works on social. And again, you have all the data. Now, it's a lot of work to go through it, but for me, it's the investment is worthwhile. And it's something that, if you're really serious about running a business, you have to actually quantify these things. You have to acknowledge when you don't know certain things. You also have to, if it's not working, stop doing it. These are things that have the numbers show us they work. So we really, really, to your point, and your original question is like the marketing, the eye, we kind of tried it all. And we figured out like our lane, what's our secret sauce? Outside of our competitive edge is our ability to communicate with more people and information share within the team. But what really is our marketing competitive edge is that I'll photograph the same listing 10 times if I have to. It doesn't matter what it costs. It has to be perfect. Perfect is better than done when it comes to marketing. Visuals have to be perfect. And in the internet age, a picture stays online forever. If you're the team who always has blurry iPhone photos, you're going to be known as the team with blurry iPhone photos. And at some point, a seller will notice that, your competitors will use that against you in a pitch, or the assets are actually going to be devalued. So you're really doing your clients a disservice if you're not taking marketing extremely serious. Sean Osher from Core, he once said, I'm not a broker, I'm a marketer. I just happen to market real estate.
Yeah, I love that. I love that take. And I think, it speaks volumes. I mean, if you're not at the listing for photos, if you're not, looking for, these key aspects or angles, and just trying to capture the home at large or the aerial that shows the entire bit and piece of the property, you're not doing it right. Of course that photo, might be taken throughout, but, figure out what, like you said, like zig when others are zagging, and take advantage of building that brand presence. Don't do the same thing, because people will notice the difference, and it will give you an upper hand.
And I'll say one thing, Jared, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No,
I find it highly relevant to what you just said. Our business has been 99% to date, 99% referral driven, which is very flattering. At some point, that actually gives me anxiety, because how many more people can talk about this? How many more friend of a friend, 1 degree of separation referrals can come in? At some point, you've sold everything to everyone, right? Like, not really, but you know what I mean. I got 3 people that I've never met this week, one I'm supposed to speak with today, that reached out. I don't know who they are, asked to help them with buying a place. 20 million, 4.5 million, 3 million. 2 of them, I said, how'd you get my, I would love to help. Let me know when you have time for a call. By the way, I'm curious, how'd you get my name? So, your name's everywhere. Not me, but Hudson Advisory. They said, your name's everywhere. We see you on social media. We see you on all the listings online. We see your ads in the paper. Everything we're looking at, you're kind of like somehow on the listing side, or you sold something in the building, and it's deeply flattering. But the point of all that is, I want to be known for having the good eye, representing the great assets, giving a shit about marketing because the details matter, versus being the blurry iPhone guy. Because trust me, there's a lot of blurry iPhone brokers. There was a $15 million house that was listed this morning. All the photos are like this. To look at it, I turn my head sideways. That's pathetic.
Yeah. No, and it's spot on. So just to rattle off a few, and I can let you get out of here. I can't only imagine that what Friday and the weekend's going to bring you and
Tom Hughes.
Tom Hughes in the house.
What's up, buddy?
So just a few kind of rapid fires here with you, Stephen. So obviously, I think everybody here's felt the push for private exclusives. Are you using this, and like, what's your seller's sentiment on this program?
Game changer. Absolute game changer. Huge value add. I'm embarrassed it took me so long to adopt it, bluntly. We may even have a case study on it. We ended up pulling a listing off of it because we got so much flow from it and so much inbound, and the client wasn't like fully ready. They were ready. They were like, yeah, let's put it on private exclusive. I'm like, hey, I have 11 people who want to see your place in the next 3 days. They're like, okay, slow down. It's unbelievable. You have no days on market. It's a litmus test on pricing. And we just put a townhouse on with a facade photo and floor plan, and photos coming soon. We haven't photographed it yet. This is, I think, 6 days ago, with 4 showings this weekend. It's like the lowest hanging fruit. And it's not a hard sell. I think to a seller, if I'm a seller and I'm like a real seller, but I'm not fully committed to going to market today, or I can't go public because I'm a public figure, or I run a business, or I don't want my neighbor to know, this is the most obvious way to sell a property discreetly. And our business, we sell 30 to 40% a year privately, all off market. To have this as an avenue to do it where it's somewhat formalized, complete game changer. Absolute no-brainer. Everyone should do it. And by the way, in inventory tough markets where there's very limited supply, you're providing your buyers incredible edge by looking there.
Yeah, great take, and congrats on the success on that. And I think when you started,
I'm new to it. Don't congratulate me. I'm very new to it. I was resistant to it for no reason other than I didn't want to have to try something new and learn something new. And I think Rory or Gordon, somebody like really hammered me on it, and I was like, all right, we'll try one. And it was unbelievable. It's almost become our go-to now. before we roll out the listing publicly, we tease it on social. We're coming soon, and we're pushing to the people who are willing to, we're pushing things to private exclusive first.
Yeah, I think I'm actually going to recruit an agent later this afternoon at the Miami Beach office, and the reason they're joining is because of private exclusive. So it's significant across.
Don't sell yourself short, Jared. There's many reasons, but that's one tool in the toolkit.
For sure. So while we're in the toolbox, when it comes to tech and tools at Compass, which one is your favorite, or do you see you and the team using the most?
I think I would say private exclusive, honestly. I think the value add, again, it's something easy to quantify. The value add's very obvious. It's not just additive for you, it's additive for the client. CRM is additive for you. Collections additive for both. Collections is great. I find it to be really private exclusive, and collections are probably my top two.
Yeah, and collections was first. I think it launched right around the time that we were joining. So it's always great to see how the first tool that Compass released in terms of tech still rises to the top.
And really quick, our market report is just another version of collections, if you think about it. It's a little bit more detailed, and we did it in a PDF form because we wanted to add more to it with the marketing initiatives, the feedback, what's coming up, what took place. Those are all things we want centralized. But it really is collections. It's what's happening around you. What's the feedback? Where are you're one of 5 houses on a block. If 2 of them are for sale and they both had price reductions, same thing that you'd see in a collection.
Yeah, no, it's spot on. And I think, one of the favorite things that I like to do for even my family and friends that are interested in real estate is would you like a market report? I take the 8 seconds to put a collection together of, active pending sales. And just like you said, fire it off to them. It's the best way to convert likely to sells. And if you're curious on this combo that I just referenced between collections and likely to sells, reach out to your sales manager or me directly. I'm happy to walk you through it.
By the way, likely to sell, also fantastic.
Yeah, it's just you want inventory right now. You want to hold the cards. You want control. You want to make sure that you don't have to worry about these commission conversations and compensation conversations. Go to likely to sell, and you'll probably end up with 2 to 5 listings. I think most people, if I look at their pages, they have 100 to 200 likely to sells. Those are just listings sitting, waiting for you to just reach out and pitch private exclusive. But yeah, thanks. Pretty passionate about that one. But final question, I ask everyone this, Stephen. So what's your favorite Compass entrepreneurship principle right now, and why?
Oh, man. I have to pick one.
You could do a little combo. We'll allow it. I kind of would. I'm going to pick several, and I'll keep it short and sweet. One is dream big. I think we're a testament to dreaming big. Go after everything, outwork everyone, be the best at whatever it is you're doing, which dovetails into obsess about opportunity. I think the NAR stuff, everyone's doom and gloom. This is paperwork. I'm great. Everyone's fucking distracted. That's an opportunity. I'm not going to worry about this stuff. I'm going to worry about all the important things, which is the opposite of paperwork, right? Again, I know that kills you, and Dominique's going to yell at me because you guys are drilling everyone with paperwork, and they need to do it. But the opportunity is that everybody's doing that. Again, contrary. If everyone's doing that, do the other thing. Bounce back with passion. I think a lot of people hear our success story, and it's amazing. And I'm, again, very flattered. But you can hear it in my voice. I work 7 days a week. It's not all wins. I said to Gordon once earlier in my career, but I'll say it today because it happens in real time. Wins and lessons. There are no losses, only lessons. If I lose a pitch, what did I do wrong? Why did the other person get it? If I lost a deal, what did I do wrong? Why did the other person get it? What can I learn? Every interaction you can learn from. It's whether or not you want to. And I think, again, if you couple the Compass tools and the efficiencies that they provide, all of these things are actually not that difficult. You're front loading the work to reap the benefit later on. And the last thing I'd say is collaborate without ego. The 2 biggest deals I did last year
were with another. Actually, the three biggest deals I did last year, and the biggest deal I've done this year were I co-represented with another local Compass agent. So not even a referral. I'm talking about someone in my market who in theory is a competitor. Again, in theory, these are friends and people we have nice relationships, which is why we work together. Collaborate without ego. You can take all the glory. I don't care. Let's just get it done. And the only place I've seen that done, by the way, is Compass. You see Douglas Elliman, you see the managers put, so-and-so and so-and-so together on a listing, and they don't know each other. They don't communicate. They probably talk bad about each other. They fight about the commissioner who brought the buyer. No, that's a complete waste of time, and it's toxic. Here, it's, hey, I'll leave his name out of it. He was going to get fired from a listing for none of it. He did nothing wrong. Him and the clients just they were butting heads at the moment. He said, hey, I think I'm going to lose this. I had sold it to them. I was the listing agent. He said, would you work on it with me? I'll bring you in. They had a nice experience with you. It's like, of course. Brought me in. I knew the person in the market who wanted that penthouse because they had reached out to me as the previous listing broker. Would they sell it again? I made one phone call. We sold it for $38 million. Sounds easy. Wasn't easy. There was a lot of other things that went into it. But the point is, that person, if they had an ego, they wouldn't have sold it. They would have been fired. And it would have went to who's no longer relevant. And I'm not smiling when I say that, but at the time, my biggest competitor was going to get the listing. So this was a win on several levels. And being able to come in and help someone that I like.
Yeah, it's remarkable, Stephen. I'm honored and grateful to just have you, here this morning to drive all this value, and hopefully, I think a lot of people take some of these things. If I'm ready to run through a door and get some listings and figure it out, and really, the motivation is real. But I can't thank you enough. It was incredible to kind of hear, what you're doing, how you guys are growing and continuing to be motivated. I think like the hunger is real. Like you guys are always looking to one up yourselves, and it's clear in your business success. So thank you so much. I really appreciate your time.
It's my pleasure. And thank you all to everyone on the call, and nice to see some familiar faces. And I hope with the weather patterns and everything going on, I don't know where everyone's located, but please stay safe. If you need anything, call Jared, Dominique, and Jeff. Don't call me. I'm in New York. I can only do so much from here, but I'm sending good vibes, and listen, another day to be great.
Thanks, Stephen. Good luck this weekend, man.
Later, guys.
All right, bye, everyone.